What brings energy and direction to your life? Maybe it's your police work or your work in another first responder profession. Maybe it's something you do off duty. What do you do when the energy and direction in your life shifts and something traumatic and catastrophic happens to you? How do you use that energy for the greater good?
You are a warrior.
321 status. What kind of vehicle is it?
You are the very best your nation has to offer.
911. Multiple shots fired.
They're asking you to lead.
5. We need a Bearcat.
It's up to us.
So 133, I need somebody that's got a visual on where the shooter is.
You must be sound in mind, body, and spirit.
42, where's the officer down? I have a rescue helicopter that wants to land and help.
This is the podcast that will make you the one.
Copy running eastbound.
The one that will bring everyone back.
I believe we have shots fired.
Give me backup now.
Because no one else is coming.
We're going to have an officer shot. 100 block of East Street.
Suspect is down.
This is the Squad Room.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Squad Room, the podcast that helps you, the modern warrior, be the one that brings everybody back. On this show, we help you deconstruct the challenges of our profession, the challenges of the lives that we lead, and how we could be more effective and more resilient and more relevant leaders in our community. Our guest today is a man who I got to meet and spend some time with a couple of weeks ago. And I'll explain how we came to know each other in just a moment. But I want to remind you that to get the show notes for this episode or any other episode and to follow me on Instagram and Twitter, you can find me at The Squad Room, and our website's thesquadroom.net. I want to talk about some good things going on with our Facebook group. We're exploring, finally, Facebook Live videos and trying to connect with you deeper there and develop our connections there through chatting on Facebook Live. Appreciate the people who've engaged so far. And lots of stuff going on as we come into the summer. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you know that I haven't had a sponsor in some time. And I had a great relationship with SB Tactical when they were sponsors of the show. And trust me, in the intervening episodes that I have gone without a sponsor, it's because I've had a lot of companies approach me, but they were all absurdly inappropriate to my audience. They didn't serve our needs or our goals. They didn't understand our dynamic or understand what we were doing. And they didn't immediately translate to keeping you safer or educating you and making you more effective and better. They were random companies, clothing companies that had no connection to law enforcement or equipment companies for things. So I've withheld and I've actually turned down a lot of sponsorships. But I have a new one, and this one I'm actually really excited about. And I want to share with you a little bit about them now, and I'm going to talk about them a little bit later in the show. But this episode is sponsored by Hardhead Veterans. It's my belief that any assignment requires access to a high-quality ballistic helmet. Not just a riot helmet, but a ballistic helmet. And whether you're on patrol and responding to an active shooter, or a SWAT cop busting down a door, or a detective serving a search warrant, you need serious protection for your head. And Hardhead Veterans makes NIJ-compliant helmets at very reasonable prices to help keep you in the fight. Now, I want to talk a little bit longer about them a little later on, but you can check them out at hardheadveterans.com. Stay tuned later in the show. I'll go tell you a little bit more about them, and I'll even give you a deal if you're in the market for a ballistic helmet of your own. Most of our agencies aren't buying these for us. We're spending our own money, or we're spending our uniform allowance on it, and they're going to give you a deal. It's a veteran-owned business. They all come out of the special operations community. They're awesome dudes. They donate to cop causes. They have cops on their staff, and they want to make the world safer for us. So thank you to Hardhead Veterans for sponsoring this episode. You'll hear more about them later on. All right, so my guest today is Eric Hodgdon. Eric is and I share a mentor in common. And if you've listened to the show for any amount of time, well, for a good amount of time anyway, then you've probably heard the episode with Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann. Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann is a retired Green Beret, spent almost 20 years in the Special Forces with tours in South America and in the global war on terror. And Eric and I are both following Scott's work very closely and engaged with him on a level that I'm very grateful for. We had the opportunity to get in the same room a couple weeks ago and start talking. And I didn't know anything about Eric when we first met, and by the end of our weekend was like, this guy's got to come on the show. His story that he'll tell you is powerful, and I'll let him tell it, but I would like and ask for your patience as you listen to this, but also this is one where, for those of us in law enforcement, we have a quick ability to close off to the information about it and to the emotions about it. We, surprise to some of you, are quick to judge sometimes. And when you hear his story, if you're not cognizant and if you're not conscious and holding the space, as we talk about in the show, for yourself to take in what he has to say, you might judge this situation from the cynical cop's view. And our goal, when we are talking about being the one to bring everybody back, the one to lead others, and to practice your own leadership, is to open yourselves to the experiences and the pain of other people. Sometimes that pain might show itself as a crime, and that's not what Eric did per se, but the story that he tells is powerful, and he's a fantastic human. I really enjoyed talking with him. He's the host of the Get Up 8 podcast, where he develops and flushes out all of the ideas around resilient leadership. And I think that is something that resiliency is a buzzword these days. We talk about that during our conversation, but it's important for people to have resilience. It's not going to go away at the end of 2018 just because the buzzword is no longer the thing. We need to be resilient, especially in our profession. We need to be able to be resilient. We have to practice those skills. And Eric will go through his story, his redemption, so to speak. Maybe that's not the right word. His navigating his grief is a better way to say it, to the point where he is now able to guide others. So without further talking from me, here's our guest, Eric Hodgdon. Eric, welcome to the Squad Room. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Garrett. Thank you so much for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
This is going to be a unique conversation because the conversation that sparked the invitation for you to come on was unique. And to give some people a little bit of background, we got to spend some time together recently in Tampa, of all places, but at an event hosted by who I've described to people as a mentor of both of ours, a mutual mentor, a guy who's been on the show, actually, Scott Mann, a former retired Green Beret lieutenant colonel. He had an event we were both at, and we got to talking, and you were sharing your story during that event, and really inspired me to try something different with this show. So welcome. I'm really excited that you're here. You don't have a background. You're not a cop, right? And
No.
Never have been, don't have any connection to the first responder world directly anyway. So, and that's unique for me. So this is good for me to stretch my boundaries as well.
Awesome.
But you're a fellow podcaster, so and we'll get to that
Yes.
too. So to give people a sense of who you are, can you walk us through kind of your story? And I don't mean starting back in childhood, but where are you from? What were you doing? We both know where your story kind of starts, but what were you doing, as an adult?
I appreciate that, Garrett. About 5-6 years ago, I was in corporate IT, working a 9-to-5 job, and I just knew there was something else out there than just getting up, going to work, coming home, and wash, rinse, and repeat. And an opportunity came up for me to be introduced to somebody who was a Beachbody coach. And interesting enough that when I randomly saw this person in a clothing store wearing a P90X hat, I went up and asked him, had he done the program? And he told me that he had, and that he was now working from home doing that full time. And I told him, well, hey, man, I have an interesting story to tell you. I was the very first P90X success story ever. And I noticed, Garrett, that you interviewed Tony Horton a few weeks ago or a few months ago. That's pretty cool. He's a good guy. So the opportunity for me to coach kind of came into play, and I jumped at it. It just spoke to me. It was almost like one of those taps on the shoulder that said I need to be, helping other people in this way. Mm-hmm. And I started down that path, and things were going pretty well. I entered into a few months after I started, I actually had to enter into a custody battle for my 15-year-old daughter, Zoe. She was having a hard time, and she had been hospitalized on a few occasions. And this one particular time I picked up Zoe. She was living in a halfway house, and I was able to pick her up and bring her home on weekends. So this one weekend I picked her up and brought her back to the house, and she was upstairs in her bedroom, and she was listening to some music, burning some jasmine incense, and she was applying this really cool henna tattoo on her hand. It had a sun design on it. And if you've ever smelled henna ink, it's got a very acrid smell to it. It's like orange juice and gasoline. It's just gross, it just hangs in the air. But while that ink was drying, I asked her if she wanted to make some kale chips, and she said sure. So afterwards, we were cleaning up, and she said, Dad, I'm really tired. I want to go to bed. And I love you, pumpkins. I love you too, Dad. I was back in my computer to do some work, and I went upstairs a little while later to say goodnight to Zoe. And when I opened her bedroom door, I could hear Jonathan Frusciante's guitar playing on the stereo, and a string of Christmas lights was lit around the perimeter of her room, but she wasn't in her bed. Now, out of the corner of my eye and in the dim light, I could see that she was standing in her closet, and I thought she was going to jump out and scare me. I said, Zoe, what are you doing? But she didn't answer me because she wasn't standing in her closet. I had to call 911, and for the next hour and a half, it's a blur. 5 days later, over 900 people came to Zoe's wake. 900 people. I couldn't tell you how grateful I am for that. And her friends were coming up. Her friend Kelly came up, and all she was doing was sobbing. And all I could do was put my arm around her and say, it's going to be okay, sweetie, because Zoe would want you to remember all those good times you had together, right? And another friend, Sarah, came up and said, I'm so sorry, Mr. Hodgdon. I don't get it. Zoe was so nice to me, and she was always smiling. And all I could say was I don't get it either, but it's going to be okay, sweetie. And as more and more people came up to share stories of Zoe with me, to tell me how much that she impacted them, inspired them, and gave them hope, and to tell me that they were sorry for my loss, I was sorry for their loss because I knew what we were all going to be missing. Her smile, her energy, her badass ukulele skills, and really her philosophy of life to just be. But it took me a long time to feel somewhat normal. I wasn't exercising at all, where I was very active previously. I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't eating well. I just wasn't myself. And it took even a longer time for it to sink in that Zoe would be so pissed off with me if she knew that I was letting all those good memories from her life stop me from living mine. And I knew that I had to make peace with this. That I did not feel like I needed to stay down on my knees. Yes, it brings you to your knees, but I felt that I needed to make peace with this, which actually gave way to forgiveness, not just of Zoe for taking her life, but of myself for what I perceived I didn't do. And then that made way for gratitude to come into my life, and some beautiful things started to happen. I started to see Zoe everywhere. Maybe it was her same color hair I would see on another girl. Maybe it was a pair of Chuck tees that I would see somebody wearing, and sometimes it was even a song that came on the radio that she used to sing along to, which I would blast at that point because it just reminded me of her. In Greek, the name Zoe means life, and the greatest lesson that Zoe ever taught me is that we have to rise above the noise of life, and when life knocks you down, you got to get back up again. And that, when you're navigating a loss like that, even if it's a child or another loved one, you are standing at the edge of a chasm, Garrett. You're standing you're looking at fog and unknowns and questions and everybody has their own set of or their own chasm that they have to navigate. And a lot of people don't choose to do that. But when I was looking around and seeing Zoe's friends looking at me like, okay, now what the hell do we do? I knew that we all had to get to the other side of our chasms and to get to our better days. And for a couple of years, it really was, just kind of navigating step by step, falling down, getting back up, learning something new about Zoe, connecting with her friends deeper, building those relationships. Amazing kids. In fact, collectively, they all remind me of her. Some of them are really funny as shit too. So it's just all these little components that kind of make me feel like Zoe's still here. And it wasn't until about 2015 when I went to a Beachbody men's leadership event in Dallas, Texas, and they brought a speaker up on stage who I was slightly familiar with the name only because his brother was a quarterback for the New England Patriots back in the 80s, but the gentleman's name is Bo Eason, who was a former NFL pro himself. And Bo did not tell us a story about how to build our business. He didn't tell us a story about, parenting or finances. What he told us was a personal story about how when he was 9 years old, he had a dream to be the best safety in the NFL. This was his dream. And when he made the offer for us to come work with him to tell our story, I can't tell you how fast I jumped out of that seat and ran to the back of the room to give him my slip, because I wanted the world to know who Zoe is. And I didn't know which way this was going to go. But just as much as that tap on the shoulder came when I was in that clothing store and saw that dude up with the P90X hat, this was even more of a tap on the shoulder that I need to do something that's much bigger than I am and help other people who are stuck in struggle to rise above their noise of life so that they may thrive and see the beauty in life again. And that's what I've been doing now for the last 3 years.
I think for someone who's listening, I want to tie this directly to the experience of a cop, right? Of a law enforcement officer,
yes.
Or even the first responders that are listening. And then I want to go back into and dig into each of those episodes of your life a little more in depth.
Sure.
But, to me, I think when I hear your story, I parallel that to the challenges that we face. To the grief that we experience collaterally.
Yes.
We often are collateral damage or where we receive the collateral damage from someone else's grief.
Yeah.
And we continue, it doesn't end just at one time. It continues and continues and continues. And we take 20x sort of brunt force of it. So,
yes.
So to me, when you talk about finding opportunities to tell these stories and to kind of guide others out of the grief, to me, that's the quintessential positive thing that a law enforcement officer, a cop, can bring to the world.
Right.
Is that we have the ability, more than almost anybody else in the world, we contact more people in a given day than most any other type of profession, right?
Absolutely.
And if I have 10, 15, 20 public contacts throughout the day, if I can learn to tell the story, which is, my story, but also to connect with people, then that's how we solve a lot of these issues that we're experiencing today. That's my absolute belief.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's where when we started talking, I was like, I got to get you on so we can show that this isn't just about, being in law enforcement isn't just about fighting crime and chasing bad guys. That's the fun part. But, but the real work begins when it gets tough.
Right.
And it is tough. But that's where we have the most opportunity for our most impact and have our most relevance. So,
right.
Take me back and give me a little snippet of who Eric was in that corporate job and maybe as a Beachbody coach. Like, what was your vision of how your life was going to go?
I think whenever you're introduced to a new opportunity that lights you up, there is that sense of energy and direction. Mm-hmm. You're almost building a core set of beliefs around or a core set of values around that new endeavor,
Mhm.
and you just throw yourself kind of headfirst into it. And I had been in IT for 25 years at that point, or 22 years, and while I can do that work, and it lit me up when I was 22 years old when I got started with it. I started to feel a little burnt out. Like I just knew that there was something more than working for somebody else and building their dream. I wanted to build my dream. And so the vision that I had was that it was going to take some time, but that I was going to build this health and fitness business up to where I could help other people who are trying to get to a specific destination through their own health and fitness levels. What can I do to help you? But it's interesting, Garrett, that when you are introduced to something like this, it's a challenge to connect with people if you haven't done that normally. I know I'm in IT. I'm an IT guy by trade, but there at no point was communication ever an issue, at least for me. And there's a lot of parodies about IT guys. The problem exists between the chair and the keyboard. That's not necessarily true, right? So it was more of I wanted to help people, and I just didn't know how to. So I was trying to learn that as I was growing up through the IT ranks, if you will. And it was really important to me that I did connect. My customers were the people in the companies that I worked for. I was important to build those relationships to make sure that they were getting what they needed so that they could continue on and be as productive as they needed to be. And I wanted to carry some of that into the coaching world, but it's a different realm at that point because you're now asking people to trust you with their health and fitness. And people are very touchy about that. And I think people are very touchy about a lot of things that are very private to them. And I don't think without any connections, you're kind of banging your head up against a wall and trying to make things work. And if people don't trust you, they're not going to talk to you. They're not going to work with you.
Sure. And
I think for law enforcement officers, you guys, you or first responders, you guys run into that on the daily whenever you go on calls because everybody's got their walls up right away.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember when I made the call to 911 that night here at the house, and there was probably 8 or 10 police officers in the house that night. And they're human. Everybody's human, right? And I remember looking at their faces, and their faces weren't telling me anything positive. They were, doing what they needed to do, and their job was to get this situation, whether you call it under control or what have you, but get it so that they could get Zoe over to the hospital as quickly as possible and all that. But it was the looks on their faces that are still imprinted on my mind, knowing that they knew this was going to suck. They knew this was going to suck. It was really, one of those. I remember walking into the ER that night, and it like the whole room, this big ER room, was just surrounded with people, and there were 3 or 4 officers off to the right. They still didn't know what was going on. They didn't know if this was something that was self-inflicted. They had to go through that whole process of figuring that out.
Right. Yeah.
But they were just looking at me like, yeah, man, this is not good. And yet the difference was that I wasn't going home with my daughter, but they were going to be hanging up their belt that night after their shift. And, those, like you're saying, this stuff stays with people. This is not something that is just like, oh, well, that my shift is done. I can go home now. It is personal. It is something that's very deep and very taxing emotionally. If I had to deal with one loss, you guys are dealing with countless on so many different levels too.
So it was that part of the story when we were talking about all those police officers in your house, and
yes,
from your perspective, the idea of something suspicious or criminal probably never crossed your mind, right? And now you are interacting in this moment of what is, I'm sure, was severe panic and concern. Concern's not even the right word. I don't know what's the strongest word you can find for something in that moment.
It's just shock.
Shock.
It's just it's interesting because when I found Zoe, I had to use a Swiss Army knife to cut the string and to get her down, and I just tossed the Swiss Army knife off to the side, and when everybody came into my house, it was weird. It was like it was quiet. The music was still playing on the stereo, and they're working on her. I couldn't hear a word in the room, by the way. I couldn't hear a word. They were just working on her, and the officers were asking me where the knife was because I told them that because again, they don't know what's going on. They're trying to get the whole picture. And I guess I'd already picked it up and put it away, because it was just one of those things. I was just doing this as a matter of fact, I guess. And, but yeah, it is just, you're in shock. You're just trying to figure out I remember pacing around the upstairs of my house, like, what am I doing? And then I'm like, oh my God, they want to take me to the hospital now. And they were waiting for me to come downstairs. There was an officer in his car parked right out front of my house, and he was ready to go. And as soon as I jumped in the car, man, I don't think I've ever done 65 miles an hour down a 25-mile-an-hour street, but it was 11:30 at night. And, man, we got down to this hospital in about 5 minutes. And I remember I was asking him the entire way, is she breathing? Is she breathing? He's like, I don't know. But every time I asked, it seemed like he accelerated even more. He just wanted me to get there. And he had turned his radio way down, so I could still hear the clicks of the transmissions, but I couldn't hear what the communication was. So, and I don't know if they were talking about the event or some other things, but it was just, it's weird how those things are kind of burned into your memory.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I can't imagine.
From my side, it's when you told that story at our event, and immediately I was inside of that story with you because I've been the officer going up the stairs and into the room, and then trying to get a parent to focus and give me some information and get an understanding, and also at the same time trying to be sensitive to what's going on, but also making sure that medical aid is provided when needed. It is the most chaotic scene that we can ever possibly go into, and this comes back to another point that I think is really important for us to understand, is that we're blessed, is for lack of a better term. Like I am blessed or privileged to be allowed into the worst parts of people's lives and in the worst moments of their lives, right? In their most painful parts of their lives. And the energy that I bring to that is so important, and sometimes it's just really interesting to me how, I don't know how many times I've been in that situation, been in that room, and almost had this out-of-body experience of watching, kind of wondering how I got here. How in my life put me in this position of being in the stranger's room at the worst moment of their life, and now I'm expected to do something about it. And becomes a real challenge for us if we're not prepared for those moments.
Right.
And we'll get to how we prepare for those. But after her passing, it took you a while, didn't it, to really come out of that? I mean, in the story, I don't want people to think that you immediately saw a connection between this and now your purpose of going out and teaching people how to be resilient leaders. But describe some of that process and what was that like?
Well, it definitely is an interesting experience to try to work through. You are trying to make sense of what happened. You are trying to ask the question, like, why? And that's not a question that can be answered because you're never going to know fully why. And so when the house clears out after about a week, after the services are done and everybody gets back to their life, you're kind of left here with your thoughts. And those can serve you, or those can bring you down a rabbit hole of misery. And look, you have to heal. The grieving process is a process. There's no timeline to it. people can't expect that you are going to just feel better in a matter of days or weeks. Some people can get through the process much quicker than others. Other people, it takes them years. It doesn't matter. The process is that the thing is you have to keep going forward. And the only way that I can describe this process is it's like you wanting to walk a path. And first of all, this path is not cut in front of you because nobody else that you either know or that maybe you do know somebody that's gone through it, but this is your path that you have to cut. And you've got a tremendous amount of weight, literal weight on your shoulders with the sadness and the grief and the anger and all those emotions. And as you start to take some steps forward, you fall down often because the ground beneath you is very unstable. You can't get your footing. This brings you to your knees, and every time you stand up on top of the weight of the loss and you trying to move forward and your footing, you just fall down repeatedly. The key thing is that you have to get back up, because every millimeter forward that you go, a little piece of that weight comes off of your back, and every foot that you traverse, it becomes a little bit more stable. And pretty soon you find yourself not waking up in the morning and crying for 2 to 3 hours. You think about it, you are upset, you might cry, but now there's other things to do. There's other things. Maybe it's getting back into work to distract you, a positive distraction. Maybe it is starting to do some of the things that you weren't doing previously that you've always wanted to do, like a bucket list type of thing. But every step forward you take, eventually the weight starts to dissipate considerably, and the road that you're on now, the path that you're on, is much wider and it's more stable, and you've got some people with you, and you're not finding yourself camping out at certain spots for a very long period of time. And I'm talking about the milestones as you're navigating this process. And there are milestones, maybe again, like waking up in the morning and not crying. It's like, wow, okay, I didn't get up this morning and cry. I'm upset. I miss Zoe, but I'm not going to go through a box of tissues here in the next 20 minutes. And it starts to, but it takes time. And I think the biggest piece to help you move forward even faster is focusing on other people. And in this case, it was Zoe's friends. We kind of did this mutual check-in. I'd call them, how are you doing? I'm doing good. Well, how are you doing, Mr. Hodgdon? I'm great. I'm doing okay. I'm not great. I'm doing okay. And I would give them the opportunity to tell me really how they were doing. And because I was Zoe's dad and they had such a tight connection with Zoe, they felt comfortable enough for me to hold space for them where they could just tell me whatever it is that they needed to tell me. And we would walk this together. That's the thing that's also key, is that nobody can walk this path for you, no matter what you go through in life, no matter what challenge comes your way, whether you're a law enforcement officer, whether you're an IT guy, whether you're a janitor, whether you're the fifth most powerful businesswoman in the world. No one can walk these paths for you. You have to do it. But when you hold space for somebody else, you're walking alongside of them as they're going through their journey, and you kind of help them with your experiences along the way. And while I was not anywhere further ahead of them in terms of their experience of losing their friend and me losing Zoe as a daughter, they just relied on me being able to help them see the light, even if they couldn't see it, on the other side of all this chasm. So it's a process, and it just takes any time. There's still some of our friends that are struggling. There's some of our other friends that aren't struggling. They're okay, and they're thriving in life again, which is really important. They don't want to just my encouragement for them is that, look, there's too many of us that just get through life and we struggle through life and we stay in a survival mode. But that's not living, and we weren't meant to live like that. We were meant to actually be doing as much as we can for the time that we're here. And I use the example of Zoe. She was here for 15 years, but that kid left tracks and left imprints on this world and impact on this world at 15 that some people don't leave even when they're 90. So it's really about focusing on that impact that you can make on others. And that really helps the process as you move through it.
I want to dive into something you just said because this is a recent revelation to me.
Sure.
In how it applies. But explain to people what holding space means and then how you find best to be able to do that for somebody.
That's a great question. So there's two things that I think people look for whenever they're dealing with something that they're struggling with. They're either looking for a beacon or they're looking for somebody to hold space for them. And a beacon is really a guide. They show you the way, they walk the way, and they go the way. But as somebody that holds space for you is they walk hand in hand with you for as long as you need it, whenever you need it, without doing the work for you and without judgment. They're just there implicitly waiting to be your resource for healing. And through their own experiences, it's not a comfort zone as much as it is as a comfort for your heart. It helps take that heartache and turn it into a heart song when you're walking with somebody, when they're holding space for you.
Yeah, I think in my exploration of this, it's giving somebody permission. In a lot, it's giving somebody permission to grieve. To be, and it's giving yourself permission to be uncomfortable with it, because in order to be there to hold that space, it's going to be uncomfortable.
Yep.
But you're giving someone permission to grieve and to work at their pace, right?
Yes.
And I've found in our work that is another one of those opportunities that we have in these situations where one individual officer can be there in the middle of a chaotic scene, and even then can institute and create and clear a little bit of space for this person and and just hold it for him. In some ways, I think the officer that drove you to the hospital was doing that for you. I had a death investigation this week where a nice woman's elderly mother passed unexpectedly. Not incredibly, old, but not expected, and she was in shock, and she had a lot of questions, and she kind of went into one of those modes you see in some people where it was immediately the to-do list. Well, this has happened, and she's sort of ramping up her panic about it by trying to figure out, well, what mortuary do I choose, and what kind of casket, and what kind of service do I need to do, and all these decisions within the first 30 minutes of a major death in her life, right? And just going to her and just explaining to her that it's going to be okay, and you don't have to do any of that right now. Just be here and let me know what you need, and here's what I want to give you, my resources from my agency to help you. But let's just slow down for a minute and just breathe it in. And it's extremely difficult to do. It's extremely awkward. I probably screw it up more times than I succeed at it. But that human connection part of our job, I think when you're able or to even just try and do that for somebody, we can give somebody that first step towards coming back to, well, you never come back to, but to reestablishing that footing that you're talking about.
Can I interject something
please,
real quick?
No, please.
So you said,
you're not interjecting, by the way. You're the guest, so that's the whole...
Well, hold on, man. Let me do... No, just so when you said, you probably screwed up more than not, I can tell you from experience that there's no way you can screw it up when you're there for somebody else. Your presence, I think a lot of people, when you're going through a process like this, they're like, call me, let me know if you need anything, and support a lot of times right now is just a text away from somebody. It's okay, good. I got that off my back. I'm go back to my life. But when you truly ask how somebody else is doing, when you say, when you ask how they're doing, when you say, I'm going to be available at any time of the day for you, and I'm not going to wait for you to call me. I'm going to check in until you tell me to stop. And it's not a pain in the ass when that happens to people that are going through something like that. That's one of the better ways to even hold space for somebody else, is to make yourself present and available in whatever capacity works for that other person, And sometimes it might need to be a little adjusted in terms of getting it straight and what they actually need. Sometimes they need that beacon. Sometimes they need somebody to hold space for them. But I think by saying what you did to that woman, just slow down. Let's figure it out. This is a process, and that was probably the best thing you could have done. You had the option not to say anything. I don't think you're obligated to say anything. So by you stepping into that arena by saying that to her, I think that you didn't screw that up. So,
well, I appreciate the perspective, and that helps. Actually, that's quite helpful. When I graduated from the academy, I went to our equipment room to get the rest of my gear, the stuff I didn't need in the academy, but now I needed when I was on patrol. And they handed me an ill-fitting, awkward, and extremely painful riot helmet. This helmet was probably older than I was, and it was something that had probably lasted several careers of the people who had worn it before me. And it was sweat-stained, and it literally was like Vietnam-era quality inside padding, and it was horribly uncomfortable. And I've been in a few incidents in my career in which I had to deploy that helmet, and never once was I comfortable or most certainly confident in it. It was heavy, it was bulky, and it left me with a lasting headache if I wore it for more than a few minutes. I wanted a helmet I could trust, but like most of you, I had a hard time spending like $1,000 or more on a helmet that I might never need. But that's the problem, isn't it? I may never need my ballistic vest, but I still wear it every day. Well, about a year ago, I got introduced to a company named Hardhead Veterans. It's an apt name for a veteran-owned company that makes ballistic helmets. The founders come from the special operations community, and their goal is to make the world a safer place for cops. Several members of the Hardhead Veterans staff are actually active-duty police officers themselves. They reached out, and we started talking. It's about the challenges of policing in today's environment, our equipment needs, and what it's like to be a cop today. They know that we don't make a lot of money, and that it's hard for us to decide how to spend our uniform allowance, if we even get one, and that most departments are not even outfitting their officers with ballistic helmets. They're simply giving them riot helmets without any protection. So that's where Hardhead Veterans decided they were going to focus their small business, making top-quality helmets at a real reasonable price that cops can afford. They use high-end DuPont Kevlar fibers made here in the U.S., and their helmets not only meet NIJ standards for Level 3A armor, they exceed them. They're so confident in their helmets that they publish all this ballistic data on their website at hardheadveterans.com. Now, I got my own Hardhead Veterans helmet a few months ago, and the experience I had is the reason this ad even exists. From cutting the tape off the box to getting the fit dialed in onto my head, it literally took me probably 40-45 seconds. It was that quick. A few clicks of the padding system and the chin strap, and I was good to go. With my last helmet, the one that the department gave me, I spent, I think, 40 minutes and about $100 buying an aftermarket padding system that I had to wedge in there and cut pieces off because it just didn't fit. And though it made the helmet softer, it still was tight. That's not the case here. The helmet's really light, too, and the above-ear models come with all the modern attachment adapters that allow you to strap on NVGs or comm systems. And for those of you in SWAT assignments, this is really a perfect helmet. Everything you need to operate without the $1,000 or $1,200 price tag. Their helmets come with a 10-year warranty, and they offer a bulk purchase discount, so if you're in charge of purchasing at your department, make sure they know that we sent you over. For anyone who wants to purchase this helmet on their own, use the code SQUADROOM, all one word, to get $20 off. Check them out at hardheadveterans.com and use that coupon code SQUADROOM to get $20 off your purchase. All right, back to the show. You took this event in your life, and I mean, it's hard to imagine a more impactful moment in someone's life, but then to take that and completely shift your life's purpose as a result, and that's not that itself isn't uncommon, but there's a lot of courage in that too. And once that grieving period, that initial grieving period, came to a close,
yes,
and you decided to use this rather than get used by it.
Mm-hmm.
What was the path that you saw forward for yourself?
I think that it was that first event that I signed up for with Bo Eason that really opened up my eyes to what is possible to help other people. I wanted to tell Zoe's story in a way that wasn't dumping. I wanted to do it in service of others, so that if somebody was, I don't want anybody else to feel like this, Garrett. I I don't want somebody to go through a loss of a loved one and feel like they've got no life ahead of them. And I think far too many people find themselves just mired in that struggle for years at a time. And I just felt like the way through this, the way that I could get in to help other people was to start with Zoe's story. And then it started to grow from there. I mean, telling a 3-minute story about how my loss of Zoe and standing back up again, and what Zoe would want me to be doing, and I feel like I'm picking up her torch in terms of her care for other people, and applying it to what I'm doing right now. And it took me 44 years to figure out my purpose. Mm-hmm. And it was that tap on the shoulder moment from losing Zoe to make me realize that I think I was on the right path as becoming a coach. Mm-hmm. But I think after this event happened with Zoe, it just really made me aware that I am here to help people to walk with them through whatever challenge or struggle it is that they're having in life. And it doesn't matter what your profession is, that life comes at us. Mm-hmm. Curveballs come at us all the time. And we have to find a way to not just get through that, but actually come out on the other side of it with some with lessons learned and to teach other people.
So that's what you're doing now. You started with a book about this experience, right? Tell us about that.
So the book, the book is called A Sherpa Named Zoe, Z-O-I, and I started writing it in November of 2016, and through many hours of isolation and writing and coming home from work and writing, waking up at 5 a.m. and writing, it became a labor of love. It was telling Zoe's story, but also the few years since she died, what I did to help myself stand back up and help others around Zoe stand back up as well. And it's interesting that when you write a book of this nature, one, you're reliving the story over again because you want to make sure that you're telling it in the service of others. But it's also a teaching point as well, because it's causing you to go to the depths of your okay, what did I actually learn here? Mm-hmm. What did I learn? Like one of the questions I write about in the book is like, how do I know Zoe is okay? And I recalled an experience where I had a meditation and where I was meditating, and I felt like I connected with Zoe's energy, and she's like, "Dad, I am more than okay." And so that it shifts. It's like one of those questions that you have to answer, and once you get it answered, it's not as though it's ever fully resolved from a standpoint of the loss, but it's really enough to help you kind of move on to the next milestone in your healing process. And that's what this book serves to do, is to help be a guide for you. And I felt like Zoe was my guide growing up, when she was growing up, and even after she died, she's still my guide. And
what do you think?
That was the drive behind it.
What do you think is the like if someone's going through something right now and they're trying to figure out where they are in the spectrum of their path forward, is there a step one in terms of like turning the corner and moving forward? Have you found a consistent moment where someone has moved from grief through acceptance to taking that step on solid ground?
Yes, I think that the first thing is making peace with what happened. It doesn't happen to you; it happens for you, I believe. As a life lesson in some way, it's a shitty life lesson, of course, but any challenge in life can feel really shitty. But making peace with it, that okay, there's nothing I can do about this. Adjusting your mindset to know that okay, I'm here. Now what's next? And I think that's where it moves into forgiveness. Mm-hmm. You do have to forgive another person for something that you may not feel like they did to you, but you have to forgive that as a piece of the puzzle here, and you have to forgive yourself too. Mm-hmm. And I think forgiving yourself is probably more important than anything.
Probably
because
harder, too.
we tend to take on a lot of not anxiety, but we take on a lot of energy and self-doubt and I'm not good enough. I didn't do enough. I wasn't good enough to be her dad, and that's why she didn't stay. You have to make peace with that. You have to forgive yourself for what you perceive you didn't do. And I believe that opens up your life to gratitude. And when you start being grateful for what is in your life, more good energy, more good days come your way, more consistently good days come your way. And the gratitude is something that I practice daily. I think once I started to have gratitude in my life, now I felt like I could say, okay, now what's next? Now how do I move on to that point where I'm not just standing up, but really living life the way that Zoe would want me to be living life? And I think that consists of framing your mindset in a way that, again, is like, okay, this isn't happening to me. This is happening for me. You start doing things intentionally. You start living life intentionally. For me, it was going to these storytelling events and writing Zoe's story. It was traveling. It was seeing things with my two eyes that I hope I can say and show Zoe and tell about when we're reunited. It was doing some more work with Zoe's friends. But it was being intentional about it, not passive. Mm-hmm. And then I think the last step is to form your core values. What brings energy and direction to your life? And this is also your belief system. So your beliefs, all of these things it's a shift. It's not something that happens overnight. It's a slow shift. Think of it like a regular wound. When you hurt yourself, it takes time to heal. The scar tissue is stronger than the regular tissue. And so you have to give yourself that time to heal. And if you know the way, you go the way. And I think along the way, you can heal faster when you do help others.
So I want to dig into each of those a little bit because I think there's some important things that are relatable to anybody. And the first one, as you were talking, and I was thinking, as you're saying about forgiving others, I'm thinking about the forgiveness of yourself too. And then you hit on it. What was that process like? Did it take someone else telling you needed to forgive yourself, or was it like? Because I think it's much easier to forgive someone else than it is to forgive ourselves, right? We hang on to that.
No, it wasn't. It was. It was an experience that I had about a year after Zoe died. I was stuck in a routine, Garrett, where I would get off the train in the town that I live in, and it's about a 2-mile drive from the commuter rail to where I live. And I was in this routine of getting in the car, driving about a mile down the road, and I would just start crying. And I would be begging Zoe for forgiveness. I'm so sorry, Pumpkins. I wish I was a better dad for you. I wish that I would have saved you that night. So many things kind of that I was saying. And that went on for a while. But I remember one day I got off the train, and the second I closed the door to my car, I broke down. So now I had a 2-mile drive with traffic on this day particularly, where I went right into this mode of asking for forgiveness. And by the time I got about a mile down the road, I couldn't even see out my eyes were just so swollen. I was just crying so hard. And it was as if Zoe was sitting in the seat next to me, and I heard her say, "Dad, I'm okay. Geez, cut it out." Right? And in that moment, I kind of snapped out of it, and my tears kind of turned into laughter. And it was one of that realization point of like, oh my God, you're right. What am I doing? What am I doing here? That was the moment where I realized that Zoe would be pissed off with me if I was, taking those memories from her life and not living mine. And the very next day when I got in the car, I did something different. I shifted my mindset immediately to, you know what? I'm going to celebrate this ride home now. From now on, here's what I'm going to do. So I turned on the radio station that Zoe would listen to, which was a alternative station. Her favorite bands were Nirvana, Foo Fighters, and Red Hot Chili Peppers. Super big fan of those guys. And I kid you not, when 3 songs came on that radio station from those 3 bands in the time that it took me to drive home, and I had my windows open and I was blasting, I just didn't care, and it felt so damn good, man. It was just so. That for me, that was a moment of forgiveness. That's when I gave myself permission to forgive myself, and we have to give ourselves permission for that. And if we reverse the tables here, if we turn the tables and we say, okay, fine, what if it was me that died and Zoe was here? Would I want her to be driving home from school every day upset and crying? No, we wouldn't. I would want her to be living. So it was kind of looking at that from an opposite perspective as well.
Mm-hmm. And then with developing gratitude, that's something we talk about quite a bit on the show. What's your process for that? Do you have a daily practice that you do, or you mentioned meditation, but what's your practice on gratitude?
So for a while there, I was using this journal called the 5-Minute Journal.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah,
but
I've done that.
You practice gratitude in the morning and the evening, and then more recently, I've shifted over to what's called a self journal, where you're supposed to write down 3 things you're grateful for in the morning, but also your daily planner. And then at the end of the day, when you're doing your daily reflection, there's 3 more points where you can put in some gratitude, 3 things that you're grateful for the rest of the day. Mm-hmm. And what I find, Garrett, is that I'm repeating on a daily basis the same things that I'm grateful for. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they shift, but they're that impactful in my life. I'm grateful for Zoe, Christos, and Arminda. Those are my 3 kids. Mm-hmm. I'm grateful for my dog, Beans. I'm grateful for my home. I'm grateful for my health. Mm-hmm. I'm grateful for the universe. And I'm grateful for, and I usually leave that last one for whatever that day just comes at me. It could be that I had a fantastic, fantastic breakfast. I'm grateful that I had a good breakfast this morning. So it's just, and I can tell you that gratitude is that is the biggest gift that you can give yourself in a situation like this, is gratitude, because it's not tangible, but what you're doing when you express gratitude for yourself and what's in your life, it is the seeds that eventually start to sprout flowers that grow around the crater of this impact of your life. And man, I can tell you right now, there's a damn beautiful garden growing around that crater right now.
That's great.
And so I can't tell you how grateful I am for that opportunity to practice that gratitude every day.
I use the same journal. I think if you go to Amazon, I think it's Best Self Journal. But I'm on my second one too, and I like how it combines, because I know I have a phone that could do anything I want, but I need to write. Something about pen to paper to me is more impactful, and it's slower, and you get to sit with it a little bit more.
Right.
But I like those journals, and I found with your story about writing the 3 things you're grateful for. I was doing the same thing for a while myself, and kind of felt silly that I kept saying the same things over and over. So what I did was try to do something that was completely different, right, and minor. And it was last night was I was grateful that the ice maker was working in the fridge again, right? But it's a little moment, but it's a pause to even little things like that, right? And it's funny, because I think we sometimes feel like we have to show gratitude for those big things all the time, but we can be gracious. We can show gratitude or feel gratitude for, the fact that light traffic on the way to work, and now you're not feeling as tense, or gratitude for your Amazon delivery showing up on time because you were looking forward to that book. It can be silly things.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter, though.
When you allow yourself to feel gratitude for silly things, I have found, me personally, your attitude improves. You feel lighter, and you bring a bit more light into the world. And it's silly. People may not buy it, but I think it's absolutely true.
Yeah, no, I think you just hit on a good point with that, Garrett. You said, that you feel lighter. Mm-hmm. That's why, as you're walking that path through any challenge that you're dealing with in life, the more gratitude you feel, the more that reduces the weight on your shoulders that you're feeling. And if you think about your day, we are faced with so much as our mentor Scott Mann says, churn in our society, where you turn on the news and it's somebody fighting with somebody else, and it's all doom and gloom when you look at it on the news. But if you look at the reality of your life, 99% of your day is usually pretty damn good.
Mm-hmm.
And if you stub your toe and it's a split second of your entire day, yeah, it's going to sting for a little while, but is really, that's the worst thing that's happened to you today. And the rest of your day is actually okay, and yeah, there's some times when things do come at us, but that's why it's important to be resilient. So, and train while the sun is still shining. So when the clouds come, and they will come, mm-hmm. you will be able to get through that. You won't get knocked down, you'll get bumped. And resiliency is not putting on a suit of armor to block yourself away from the world. It's actually putting on getting a shield in front of you that protects protects the unit. Mm-hmm. It protects the people around you as well. And it's just it helps you withstand whatever comes your way.
I think the training, and I think it is training, and it's certainly a practice, because it's not perfection. But when you practice gratitude,
yes.
when those bad things happen, your mindset shifts, and then you sometimes can be grateful for that negative experience. And I think you can, in good moments, recognize that there's opportunity even in some of these low moments. There's an opportunity to grow. There's an opportunity to learn how to do something better. Mm-hmm. There's an opportunity to test some of your resilience and test some of your practices. It's an opportunity to test your patience.
Yeah.
So I have found, and I'm not successful with this every day, of course, but I have found that when you practice the gratitude, those things start to become opportunities and not roadblocks.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I'm grateful that I got to be Zoe's dad for even the 15 years that she was here. And I'm also grateful that I have this greater purpose that's now been exposed, if you will, through my work and doing these other events, living my life and pursuing this greater purpose. I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to do that and hopefully impact other people's lives, like you guys impact lives on a daily basis with your work. Where people realize it or not, there are times when we need that protection and guardianship, and we may not even know it. Mm-hmm. And I know that if I ever have an issue and I need to call our town's police force, they'll be out here in minutes. And I live on the edge of town, but they'll be out here and they'll take care of what needs to get taken care of. And I'm grateful for that, to have that around. And those are things that I think that that when we're faced with challenges, sometimes we don't remember to be grateful for what it is that we do have, mm-hmm. and it can kind of keep us down on our knees. But we practice gratitude; it reduces the weight, and we stand back up again.
I want to go back to that ride you took to the hospital real quick, because I think this was an important crux of our first conversation about this, because you're talking about this story that I, as I said earlier, have now put myself in, because I've experienced that on the uniform side of that. And I asked you if you've ever contacted those officers after the fact, because I thought your story and then your path towards resilience and then you getting up and standing up again was such a powerful message. And I thought, man, I would love for somebody in that situation to come back to me and pat me on the back or give me a hug and tell me how they've moved through that. What would you tell the officers, those 8 to 10 officers that were in your house that night? What would you, if you could have a cup of coffee or just speak to them at briefing, what would you say?
First of all, I would thank them for being there during that moment. As hard as it was for them to see Zoe, to see me, to deal with it, they're in a mode of help at that particular moment. Everybody's adrenaline's going, all that. So I would thank them for being there. But I would also encourage them to know that things like this happen in life, but that there's forgiveness that you can give to yourself to move forward through it. I don't know how many officers actually hold on to something like this for a long period of time, but to forgive themselves that they did everything possible in that moment to help, even if it wasn't a successful help, in their mind, in terms of like the person living. But to actually I'd pat them on the back. You guys did. I would tell these guys, look, you guys did everything in your power to help me that night, and you did. You did. You got me to the hospital. You got Zoe out of the house and down to the hospital. You were there to console me. The first person to tell me I'm sorry for your loss were the two detectives in town. And as hard as it was for them, they stepped into the arena and they did that. So I'm grateful that they were present that night, and that, hey, I stood back up again. And if you run into situations in your life where you feel like this is really tough, I don't know if I can get through this, just know that there is a light on the other side of your chasm too, and that you can get there.
I think, and when we first spoke too, this idea that you're okay, you made it out, you made it through, and we might be involved with you for 5 minutes or maybe for a couple of hours, but then we move on. Like you say, we hang up our gun belt, we go back to our family, and the next shift, it starts all over again with a whole new set of actors. And we never get a chance to do a lot of that follow-up with people or to encounter someone after the fact like that, and we certainly wouldn't be appropriate for us to seek it out. So I think it's an amazing opportunity to tell these, because I think any cop with any time on has experienced being there for someone's trauma like that in their official capacity, right? And there's plenty of cops who've done this in their personal lives too. But we never get an opportunity to hear from the people that we interact with that they're going to be okay. And I think that's, like you say, I think we hold on to the calls where we did do as much as we could have, or, the hindsight that we should have done something different. Those are the ones that'll stick with you. And to know that we are, we really are walking this life with you in parallel ways. And that I just love this when we talk. I just love this idea that you got out of it okay. You're doing, and in fact, you're now thriving.
Yes.
So part of that thriving now is your book. You're speaking on these things and developing resilient leaders, and you are also now the host of your own podcast.
Yes.
So explain the title and then talk to us about what that's about.
Oh, thank you, Garrett. So about 2 months ago, I launched a podcast called the Get Up 8 podcast, and it's a play on a quote, a Japanese proverb, fall down 7 times, get up 8. And it's there to unpack the challenges and struggles that do come at us in life, regardless of what those might be. And the guests and I will help you build resilience so that no matter what comes your way, you won't just survive it, you'll thrive in the face of it. And we started to tackle some topics that are outside of what I figured we would be talking about. For example, last week I had a gentleman on who is an electrical contractor. And as a homeowner, we tend to put our guards up, just so much like law enforcement officers and people do. When you have a vendor or a contractor come into your house, how often are you like, okay, is this guy going to rip me off? What are they going to say? What are they going to, that type of thing. And as the contractor, they want to make sure that they're doing their job that they're supposed to be doing. And it's not often met with clarity and connection.
Sure.
And so bridging those gaps between not just the vendors and the contractors, but the people, it's a two-way street. It's not just one or the other. So we talked about that on one of the episodes, and I've talked to other people about losses that they've had in their life, and I've talked to a former guest of yours, Traver Boehm, about when life comes at you in a certain way, how are you bringing yourself back? And Traver's story is obviously very powerful, and you guys know that one. It's I'm enjoying doing this. I'm enjoying exploring different topics about building resilience and seeing where it goes. So that's been going now for a couple months.
A question I typically ask everybody, and then we'll get to how people can track you down. But I like this question, and it's because it's not often a forum, especially for a quote unquote regular civilian, to speak directly to law enforcement. But this is a good opportunity. So the question here is, if you could teach every cop in the country one thing, what would it be?
Wow, that's a great question. If I could teach them one thing, is to make deeper connections with the people they come in contact with, and that's a big ask. But it's also a big teaching point, because in those deep connections, Garrett, trust builds. Whether you talk to that person or not, you are building a little relationship with them. And when you have that trust and you have that connection and you have that relationship, the interaction, even if it comes around again in the future, is going to be that much better. So that's what I would teach.
Oh, it's a great one. I like that one a lot.
Awesome.
All right, so where can people find you on social media? Where do they find your podcast?
Thank you, brother. So the podcast is called just getup8podcast.com. On social media, I'm on Facebook at getup8. And on Instagram, it's Eric B. Hodgdon. And I have a website that's erichodgdon.com.
And we'll put all the links for your socials and your website and your podcast. We'll put all those in the show notes for this episode too. And people
Thank you.
Go to
Appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. They can go to thesquadroom.net for your episode, and they'll find those stats. So you had something else?
Oh, no. I thank you so much for having me on today. This is fantastic. You guys are I appreciate all the work you guys do, and I appreciate being able to come on and share Zoe with you.
This is a great conversation, man. Resilience is something that it's kind of a buzzword these days.
Yeah.
And it's almost annoying, because this is something that we've always needed. And in a lot of ways, it's important, because it is so important that the more time we can talk about it, the better. But my fear is that, like 2017 was the year of mindfulness. Mindfulness, everything was about mindfulness, and that's important. Absolutely. We have tons of topics about that. This year seems to be a lot of resilience, and it's going to be on people like you to carry that torch forward and make sure that in 2019 we don't forget about it, and that we don't move on to a new thing. Because I think my experiences have been that when you are resilient, all things come to you during those times in your life. And so I'm expecting you to continue to help us carry that torch forward and teach as many of these people out there how to be resilient leaders as they can possibly be. So, Eric, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Garrett. I really appreciate it, brother.
All right, thanks for listening to The Squad Room. If you like what you heard today, if you got something out of this conversation, please consider leaving a review on iTunes or the podcast player of your choice. It helps us spread the word about the show. Another thing you can do, grab the phone out of someone's hand, grab their phone. Don't do a robbery, but gently ask them if you can borrow your phone. Have them subscribe to the show. Tell them about it. Send them a link to one of the episodes. Help us pass the word and help us get this momentum going. Nobody is coming to save us. It's on us. We have to be the ones to take control and ownership of our lives, and decide today to be a leader in our community, in our department, in our family, in our church, wherever that may be. We have to make a conscious effort to decide to be that person, and we need help. We need to recruit people. We need to get people on our side, and we do that by spreading the word of this show and the message of the guests that we have here. To keep up to date, you can text The Squad Room, all one word, to 44222 to get signed up for our mailing list directly from your phone. You can also, again, follow me on Instagram and Twitter at The Squad Room, or join our Facebook group. Search Squad Room Facebook group, and it'll come up. It's closed for law enforcement personnel, people who are aspiring to be in law enforcement or law enforcement supporters. I vet everybody, and it's a good chance to ask questions and engage in some good conversation. So, I want to take a moment to thank each of you who are new to the show also for listening. We have a lot of new listeners, and I appreciate the enthusiasm you've brought and the excitement you've brought at the topic. It is definitely motivating to hear that this is connecting with you. One thing I didn't mention is my email address. You can always reach me, Garrett, at thesquadroom.net. That's 2 R's and 2 T's. If you want to reach out and have a conversation, have a question, and I will do my absolute best to get back to you as soon as possible. All right, until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.